I should have stayed home that Christmas. The snowfall was beautiful, thick flakes blanketing the neighborhood in silence, but something about the quiet unsettled me. I told myself it was just the holiday blues, that I was overthinking as usual. My sister had sent me a text hours earlier. "Come by at 7, we have a surprise for you." I didn't want to go. I didn't like surprises. But guilt can be a powerful motivator, especially when family's involved. I parked my car in the driveway of my childhood home, the old house looking just as I remembered, except for the lights. My sister had gone overboard with the decorations this year. Twinkling LEDs wrapped the porch railing, a glowing Santa waved from the yard, and oversized ornaments hung from the skeletal tree out front. It should have been festive, but the way the lights flickered felt wrong. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. No laughter, no music, just the faint creak of the wooden floorboards beneath my boots. "Hello?" I called out, shutting the door behind me. The air felt colder inside than it had outside. "In here," my sister's voice rang from the living room. I stepped in and froze. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the Christmas tree. My sister, Sarah, sat on the couch, her face half hidden in shadow. Beside her was a box wrapped in silver paper. "Merry Christmas," she said, her smile too wide. "What's this?" I asked, nodding at the gift. "For you," she said. "Open it." Something about her tone made my stomach twist. Her smile didn't reach her eyes and her hands fidgeted in her lap. I knelt by the box, hesitating. "What's in it?" She didn't answer, just stared, waiting. The wrapping paper tore easily, revealing an old wooden box with a strange symbol carved into the lid, a circle with jagged lines spiraling inward like a sun with too many rays. "What is this?" I asked again, my voice trembling. "It's tradition," Sarah said, her voice distant. I opened the box. Inside was a single red ornament, its surface so polished I could see my reflection. But the longer I stared, the less it looked like me. My face warped, stretched, the eyes in the reflection too wide, the mouth too long. I slammed the lid shut and stumbled back. "What the hell is this, Sarah?" She didn't move. "You have to hang it," she whispered. "What?" "On the tree. You have to hang it. It's the only way." "The only way for what?" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. The lights on the Christmas tree began to flicker, the glow casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. The room felt colder, the air heavy. "Sarah, what's going on?" She finally stood, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, it has to be someone, and it can't be me. Please, just hang it. Please." The shadows crept closer, stretching across the floor like claws. The tree shook, ornaments clinking against each other. "No," I said, backing away. "No, I'm not doing this." "You don't understand," Sarah screamed, her voice raw. "If you don't, it'll take us both." The box in my hands grew hot, the symbol on the lid glowing faintly. The shadows wrapped around Sarah's ankles, pulling her toward the tree. She screamed, clawing at the floor. "Hang it!" she shrieked. "Hang it!" In a blind panic, I grabbed the ornament and threw it onto the tree. The moment it settled on a branch, everything stopped. The shadows retreated, the lights steadied, and the air warmed. Sarah lay motionless on the floor, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She was breathing, but just barely. What did I do?" I whispered. She looked up at me, her voice barely audible. "It's your turn now." "What does that mean?" I asked, shaking her. But she didn't answer. She just stared at the tree where the red ornament shimmered, its surface no longer reflecting me, but something else entirely. Something watching and waiting. It was Christmas Eve in the quiet town of Hollow Pines. Snow covered the streets and sparkling lights decorated every house except for the old Marlowe Manor, a deserted relic at the town's edge. Its darkened windows seemed to stare, waiting. Lena and her friends, Mark, Sophie, and Jason, dared each other to visit the manor that night. Local legends spoke of a twisted spirit, the Frost King, who cursed anyone that disturbed its icy solitude. Scared of a fairy tale? Mark teased as they approached the rusty iron gate. Sophie hesitated, her breath visible in the frosty air. "Let's just take a quick look," Lena urged, already pushing open the creaking gate. The snow-covered path crunched beneath their feet as they approached the towering front door. Jason shivered, but managed a grin. "Merry Christmas, to our doom." The manor's grand hall was frozen in a forgotten time. Dusty wreaths hung from cobwebbed beams, and a decayed Christmas tree stood lifeless in the center, its ornaments dull and tarnished. A chilling wind howled outside, though no doors were open. Sophie paused near the tree, noticing small footprints trailing across the dusty floor, too small to belong to any of them. Suddenly, faint carols echoed through the manor. Silent night, holy night, all is calm. Their phones flickered off, leaving only the dim moonlight streaming through broken windows. Jason whispered, Who's singing?" A child's laugh echoed from the second floor. Panic surged through them. They ran toward the front door, but the heavy oak door wouldn't budge, frozen shut. Frost crept across the walls, forming jagged, icy patterns. "Run!" Mark shouted, dragging Lena toward a side hallway. Sophie, trembling, tripped near the decayed tree. From the shadows, icy fingers gripped her ankle. She screamed, but the others couldn't reach her in time. Frost consumed her in seconds, leaving behind a frozen statue, her face twisted in terror. The carols grew louder. Sleep in heavenly peace. They fled deeper into the manor, icy breath curling from their lips. Behind them, frosted footprints advanced, slow and deliberate. Mark collapsed near a shattered window, gasping. "It's watching us." Lena saw it then, a towering figure cloaked in frost and shadow, crowned with jagged icicles, its hollow, frost-rimmed eyes fixed on her. Jason hurled a rusted candlestick at the figure, but it shattered into icy shards midair. "Run!" he yelled, buying them precious seconds. But there was nowhere to run. The last thing Lena saw was a frostbitten hand reaching out, dragging her into endless, freezing darkness. By morning, the manor stood silent once more, encased in ice. Townsfolk found no trace of the four friends, only frosted footprints leading deep into the snow-covered woods. And on still, wintry nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the haunting carols. Silent night, holy night, sleep in heavenly peace. It was the night before Christmas, and the Roberts family was preparing for a peaceful holiday. The house, nestled on a hill, was adorned with sparkling lights, and the fragrant pine tree stood proudly in the corner. Little Emma, full of excitement, was already tucked into bed, dreaming of the presents she'd receive in the morning. But the night felt unusually still, almost too quiet. Even the wind, which typically howled through the trees, seemed to hold its breath. As Mrs. Roberts arranged the last of the stockings by the fireplace, she felt an unsettling chill pass through the room. She paused, looking around. The warmth of the fire should have felt comforting, but there was something about the air that made her uneasy. She shook it off, attributing it to the stress of the holiday preparations. Later, as she and her husband climbed into bed, she heard a faint noise, like a soft knocking, almost imperceptible but persistent. It was strange. No one ever visited this late, especially in such a fierce storm. "I think it's just the wind," her husband mumbled, half asleep. But Mrs. Roberts couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. The knocking came again, louder this time, and with a sense of urgency. She slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to the front door, her slippers tapping softly on the wooden floor. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing but a figure standing in the snow, cloaked in a faded red coat with a hood pulled over his face. For a moment, she thought she saw a flash of something unsettling in his eyes. Too dark, too still, but when she blinked, it was gone. With a deep breath, she opened the door, her heart racing. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to sound calm. The man didn't speak at first, just stood there in the snow, his face obscured by the hood. Finally, he muttered, "Please help me. I've lost my way." There was something about his voice that seemed distant, like it didn't belong to the moment. Mrs. Roberts hesitated. The storm outside was brutal, but she didn't want to let a stranger inside, especially one who seemed so out of place. Still, the cold outside and his desperate plea overpowered her hesitation. "Are you okay? Do you need to come inside?" she asked. The man nodded slowly and stepped forward. As he passed her, she noticed something odd. His boots left no trace in the snow. It was as if the snow itself refused to touch the ground where he stood. He sat down in front of the fireplace, staring into the flames, his hands hidden beneath his coat. Mrs. Roberts stood in the doorway for a moment, unsettled by the absence of footsteps, but then she shrugged off the thought, thinking it was just the storm playing tricks on her. She turned to check on Emma, but when she entered her daughter's room, Emma was wide awake, her face pale, her eyes locked on the wall. "Mom, who is that man in the living room?" Mrs. Roberts froze. She hadn't told Emma about the visitor. How did she know? Emma had never opened the door. Panic surged through her. She rushed to the living room, but when she entered, the man was gone. There was no trace of him. The fire still crackled, but the room felt colder than before. In the morning, the family woke up to a beautiful, snow-covered landscape. But as Mrs. Roberts stepped outside to check the front yard, her heart sank. By the door, there was a single black boot print in the snow, one but no others. As she looked closer, the imprint began to fade, as if the snow itself didn't want to remember it.